Hey guys, today I'm reading Yankee Doodle Gals, Women Pilots of World War II, and I'm reading part 6. Next came a medical exam at an army base. The woman had to pass the same medical exam given to male recruits. Women had to be at least 5 feet 2 inches tall, so their feet couldn't reach upon pedals. They also had to be strong because military planes at this time didn't have automatic use today. It took a lot of strength to push the foot pedals and to operate the main and control called the stick. Altogether, 1,830 women passed all these requirements and were accepted into Jackie's training program. More than half of those accepted in 1,074 completed the training successfully. Like Nancy's pilots, many of Jackie's trainees had brothers, fathers, farmers, husbands in the armed forces. These women were eager to do their part. On their way. After being accepted into Jackie's training program, the women had to make their way down to Texas, where the WASP training center was located. A few women drove, but most went by train. I remember standing up or sitting on my suitcase the whole way. I didn't get a seat, says Maggie G., who took a train from her home in Northern California. Trains were hard to get on at the time. There were so many soldiers being moved about on the trains. I had never been that far away from home before. It's not like now, when everyone travels so much. I was nervous. I was excited, too, and wonder what it was going to be like. Left out. Few minority women served in the WASPs. There were 2 Asian Americans, including Maggie G., and 1 Native American, but no African Americans. The armed forces were still segregated. African Americans couldn't serve in the same units, sleep in the same barracks, or eat at the same tables with whites. The Army set up a special base in Tuskegee, Alabama, to give pilot training to about 900 African American men, but not to any African American women. Jackie Cochran discouraged African Americans from joining the WASPs. She felt that fighting prejudice against women pilots was hard enough without also battling race discrimination. She feared this extra problem might make the Army end the WASP program. It's a terrible thing to say, but things were that way then, explains McGee. Several black women applied. Some didn't have enough flying experience. Even those who did weren't accepted. I was refused because of the color of my skin, concluded Jeanette Harmon Bragg in her autobiography, Soaring Above Setbacks. After this rejection, I was upset. I knew I could fly. I even had my own plane. Jeanette had been flying for several years and had helped start a flying school and an organization for black pilots in Chicago. After the WASP rejection, she focused on her nursing career, but was honored in 1982 by the National Air and Space Museum for her earlier contributions to aviation. Luckily, it's different now, notes Maggie. After the war in 1948, President Harry Truman ended segregation in the armed forces. Today, people of any race can serve as equals in all branches of the military. Washout worries. You are very badly needed. That's what Jackie Cochran told the first class of 30 women pilots on the day in this November 1942. When they began training at the school she had set up in Texas. Then came a no-nonsense warning from the Army officer in charge of the training center, Captain Paul Garrett. If you think you're hot pilots, I'd advise you to forget it. You are here to learn to fly the way the Army flies. Tough training. He listed several ways the woman could wash out. Pilot slang for funk. Not only might they have to leave the program if they did poorly in their classwork or failed too many flight tests, they could also wash out if they misbehaved or didn't obey Army rules. The whole time I was in training, I thought I was going to wash out every day, recalls Jean Shaffer's rat-filled chick, who was in one of the latter classes. Every few weeks, a new class of women pilots arrived to start this tough training. Many classes had more than 100 students. Altogether, 18 classes took the training, spending from 5 to 6 months learning to fly the Army way. Even though training was tough and the women worried about washing out, they loved the challenge. I'm so happy here, Marjorie Osborne Nicole wrote in a letter home to her mom. Last night, one of the girls and I walked all over the field, and every once in a while, we'd just stop and pinch each other to make sure we were really here. The Army way. Jackie's trainees received nearly the same kind of military pilot training that male cadets received. The women's course was a little shorter than the men's, partly because women didn't need to learn combat skills, such as how to fire a plane's guns. The women could also skip the beginning flying lessons that men took because WASPs already knew how to fly. Other than that, WASPs covered pretty much the same material as the men and did as well too. The percentage of students who finished training successfully was the same for women as for men. They kept us busy, recalls Jean. Trainees rose at 6 a.m., had breakfast, and were ready for action by 7 a.m. Half of each day was spent on flying. For the rest of the day, trainees went to ground school, taking classes in subjects such as physics, weather, maps, and the science of flying. They learned navigation skills so they could find their way through the sky, and studied math to do the calculations needed to plan routes. After a 7 p.m. dinner, there was homework and studying for tests. Then it was lights out at 10 p.m. It was excellent training, says Jean. It taught me the fine art of flying. Fog, sand, and snakes. It's amazing that Jackie's first classes did well, because their first training center was less than wonderful. Jackie had only 2 months to set up her school. The only place she could find for it was some buildings at Houston Municipal Airport. However, there were no barracks at the airport where women could live. They had to stay at nearby motels, some of which were run down. There wasn't a wide variety of planes at the airport for students to use for practicing. Even worse was the thick fog that rolled in from the Gulf of Mexico, often making it impossible to fly. In April 1943, Jackie persuaded the Army to move the training center to the Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas. This airbase was deep in the heart of West Texas, hundreds of miles from the foggy coast. The base had been used to train male pilots and had classrooms, barracks, and plenty of planes. The last male students soon left, and the women had the best to themselves. Skies over the new training center at Avenger Field were clear much of the time, and the lane was flat, making it a great place to fly. However, there were a few drawbacks. It was very desolate, recalls McGee G. Sweetwater today is different. It's quite green. Back then it was a desert. Faith Buchner Richards adds that the wind blew all the time and you had to learn how to adjust to that. Marjorie joked in a letter to her mom that everything looks pretty dusty around here. The food is excellent, and in between meals we chew dust. It was very hot in the summer and cold and snowy in the winter. There were scorpions, notes Nani Horton Anderson. Big ones. When you hit them with a shoe, they made a crack. There were also black widow spiders, tarantulas, and rattlesnakes. Before climbing into a plane, wasps checked cockpits to be sure a rattler hadn't slithered in for a nap. But those snakes didn't stop some daring wasps from carrying their beds outside on hot Texas nights to try to cool off. Because the barracks had no fans or air conditioners, however, one night in the light of the stars, some of them saw a snake slithering over near a group of girls sleeping. According to Marty Weil, who felt very relieved when the snake was killed. Fear of the rattlers led the woman to choose sturdy shoes for flying. Shoes that could be strapped on or tied snugly to they wouldn't fall off if a woman had to parachute out of a plane. The hot desert was not something you wanted to walk through barefoot, explains Elaine Danforth Harmon, because of the rattlesnakes and the heat. Zoot suits. But that's what I'm going to end for right now. I have to take a break. Just going to take a little break. zoot suits. Besides snug fitting shoes, trainees wore huge overalls while flying. The Army provided these overalls, but they came only in men's sizes. Faith notes they were either big or too big. You were swallowed up by them. You wound the belt around your waist a couple of times. Wasps called the overalls zoot suits, after baggy suits popular with some men at the time. The Army also supplied each wasp with a leather jacket. When not flying, the trainees wore their own clothes. They didn't have Army uniforms because they weren't officially in the Army. For special occasions, the women tried to buy clothes that looked like uniforms. Jackie's trainees bought khaki pants and white shirts from graduations. Many wore these outfits after they graduated and wore on the job. The pilots in Nancy's plane delivery units bought gray suits. Finally, in the spring of 1944, about a year and a half after Jackie's and Nancy's program started, Jackie persuaded the Army to give all the women pilots their own special uniform. Good-looking suits in the dark blue called Santiago blue. Not holding hands and making shows up there. Army rules. Although they couldn't wear Army uniforms, the women had to obey Army rules. They lived in buildings called barracks that were divided into many two-room units. Each room